It's all dangerous, but one of the
Yeah.
big dangers of dropping people in on a rappel mission and especially extracting them out is the fear of engine failures or for some reason something potentially could get caught up into the rotor blades of the aircraft.
Hmm.
Now you have this 150-foot rope with six guys hanging off the back of it.
How many?
Six
6 guys, one rope. Okay.
stacked up on top.
Welcome to season 2 of the Knife Wife podcast. I'm Suz, here with my husband,
Bob Terzuola.
We're professional creatives and entrepreneurs who live, love, and work together. We share our stories to find ourselves in others. P.S. This podcast has little to do with knives. Hey everybody, it's Suz on the Knife Wife podcast. I'm here with my partner.
That's Bob. That's me. Hi, everybody.
I am still Bob's participation trophy wife. And we're a couple old folks here doing this podcast. People seem to be listening, and they've sent in some questions. Today we're going to answer a couple of the questions. Bob and I were born before seatbelts, right, Bob?
Long before seatbelts, almost before cars.
Yeah. TikTok did not go away, so we've been pressured to do a dance, and Bob says no, but I think we're going to have to do one. Once I got a tattoo, I got my first tattoo this year, the wheels came off the cart. Podcast, tattoo, stand up, it's all, just what everybody does when they're 69 years old. I can't help myself. And Bob just is my patient supporter here. We have a couple questions from our listeners. One is from M. Gunner. He wants or she wants to know, I don't know what the M stands for, who does the cooking?
Me. Most of it.
No. For years, I did the cooking.
Oh, yeah, that was then. This is now.
Right. And so he has been. He's expanding his repertoire daily.
I'm trying all sorts of new things.
He is. What are some of the favorites you make? What are the staples?
Sausage and peppers.
Yeah.
And, yeah, I know you say that.
I love it. It just doesn't love me.
Italian meatballs with fresh tomato sauce.
Mm-hmm.
Chicken Milanese.
Yeah. So, and then, I don't know, then I throw a few things at him and say, how about this? How about that? And he's doing it. The funny thing is that his dad, late in their years, once his mom, I think when she developed diabetes, right?
Mm-hmm.
He started doing all the cooking.
He did.
And
baking.
And baking. Well, you haven't tried baking yet.
No, I haven't.
And that's still my forte. So that's the answer to that question. And then GSJJ wants to know, where can we see Suz do stand-up? Well, if you watch my YouTube channel, Eccentric Suz, you'll be able to see little snippets of me doing stand-up.
Eccentric Suz.
Yeah. Locally right now, I mean, that's, I'm just new at this. Locally, I'm going to have a show either the 18th or 19th of this month. I'm not sure which lineup I'm in at the National Comedy Theater, which is in San Diego. And I did my first show there, and that went pretty well, actually. I hope the next one goes well. I've been sick and out of town, and so I haven't practiced my next 10 minutes very much, but I will say I'm doing one thing about aging. Then I have another thing about being married to an Italian, and then what is my other thing, Bob? I don't know what the other thing is. I've been working on 3 different 10-minute bits. I've got to fish or cut bait soon because I got to get these down and time them and everything.
Fun Bobby.
Well, Fun Bobby. Yeah, you got cut off at Fun Bobby. Yeah, you're Fun Bobby. You were just at a show and nobody called you Fun Bobby.
No, they know better.
They know better.
They know better.
What would happen?
I would have given them a dirty look.
Oh, okay.
You're the one who can call me Fun Bobby.
Okay. And, well, Katie and a few other people call you Fun Bobby.
Well, that's true.
Have for years. But at the show, what was surprising is I wasn't there because I was sick, as you can probably hear in my voice. But at the show, the California Custom Knife Show, people were telling you how funny I was.
That's true. Yeah. And I was amazed that I'm married to a stand-up comic.
Yeah, well, she's working on it. I don't know if that's going to be my thing, but, I'll try to check those boxes. Anyway, today we have someone with us who we've known for years. Bob's known him even longer than I've known him through the knife world. However, his job, now he makes knives, but his jobs, which he'll share with us, were not in the knife world. He's always telling me, oh, when I did this, when I did that, and I just love his stories. And I also happen to love a Tennessee drawl. And I said, you can read me the phone book. with the Tennessee drawl. I just love that accent. So anyway, today we have with us Tim Wilson.
Tim Wilson. Hi, Tim.
Hey, thanks again for inviting me on your show. And yes, you both are very, very dear friends of mine. And I've known Bob for quite a while. In fact, Bob, I think it was Frank Centofonte that was the guy who introduced us.
Yeah.
Yeah, long time ago.
And Frank was the one of the many people who helped me in the knife making industry. Great bunch of people. Great bunch of people.
Yep. However, before you became a famous knife maker, what did you do?
Tell us your job history.
A fun job.
Well, okay. Well, my background, I'm from West Virginia, and you can always tell someone from West Virginia because the hills are so pronounced that generally, as you develop in life, one leg is longer than the other. So you can tell that with the cattle also in West if they come from West Virginia.
Really? I
But,
never knew that.
Really?
Yeah.
But I was born and raised in Huntington, West Virginia, which is the most southwesterly portion of the state. You can go across the river and be in Kentucky. You can go across another bridge and be in the state of Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
It's where the Ohio and the Big Sandy River meet. And in fact, that's where I learned to fly airplanes to begin with. Pretty dangerous airport, Huntington Tri-State. In 1970, there was a very tragic accident that happened there. I attended Marshall University, and the Marshall University football team perished in a tragic aircraft crash. It was just a tragic thing that happened to the community, rebuilding the football program because the entire staff and coaching staff were the players, family members were killed in that crash.
Mm.
But anyways, that's where I learned to fly.
And you said after the crash, okay, now I want to learn to fly. I mean, were you flying before that crash?
No, I was not. I was not flying. I was, I believe, I was about 16 years old when that occurred.
Okay.
So as we move forward, that's where I learned to fly. I flew little single engine airplanes. Also, in 1976, I had joined the local police department. I was a patrol officer at one small police department from 1976 to 1978.
Mm-hmm.
And then I left that department, went to another department where I stayed from until 1983. I finished my bachelor's degree. At the same time, my wife was attending anesthesia school. So it was one of these things where I was nighttime, part-time, no time.
Yeah.
But I was able to finish. And at the time I finished, my father was a career military guy. And he brings home this article about the Naval Investigative Service,
NIS.
which later became the Naval Criminal Investigative Service, NCIS.
Mm-hmm.
So I applied, and after about a 2-year waiting period, I was hired. They sent me to the Naval Air Station in Memphis, Tennessee. Now, you think that being the Naval Investigative Service, it would have some type of association with the Navy. Well, no boats there, no ships there.
Tennessee.
But they did have A schools where they taught air traffic control and a variety of what the military considered to be A schools.
Mm-hmm.
So I worked there. I was a special agent. I did a lot of criminal investigations, and I got selected for a protective service detail teams.
Tell us what that means.
We had teams that were selected by the State Department to provide protective service details for a variety of people. Commandant of the Marine Corps, Secretary of the Navy, Secretary of Defense.
Mm-hmm.
And we also were selected to provide protective services for dignitaries that were visiting the United States
Okay.
officially. And I'll tell you a funny story about one. There was an Egyptian attaché that was very Americanized. His name was Abu Ghazala. Have you ever seen Charlie Wilson's War?
Sure.
The movie,
Yes.
Charlie
Sure.
Wilson's War.
Yep.
Charlie Wilson's a very wealthy oil baron from Texas. He was in Congress. He was very involved in funneling money to the Afghan fighters when they were fighting the Russians, when they were invaded. Well, this guy was associated with Charlie Wilson. Now, I'm a nobody. I'm on these details. And when you develop a team, a protective team, there's what they call a continuity agent. And the continuity agent goes everywhere the protectee goes.
Mm.
You ride in the car next to him. Anywhere he goes, you end up going. So I'm on these details, and the first detail I was on, the protectee gets invited to the White House. Now here I am, a West Virginia boy, never been hardly. You kind of get the idea that here I am standing at the White House. We put the protectee into the Oval Office for this meeting. Down the hallway comes George H. Bush, and at the time Ed Meese, who was the Attorney General. Ed Meese goes into the Oval Office to attend the meeting as the President Bush walks up and sticks his hand out. So I'm thinking he's talking to the Secret Service agent that I'm standing next to. And he sticks out his hand, wants to welcome me to the White House. Hey, if there's anything you need, let me know. We'll make it happen. And
Mm.
I'm thinking to myself that, here I am again, just a boy from a small town in West Virginia, and I'm at the White House now meeting with the president. But he wasn't there to meet me. He was there to meet the guy that we were on protective service.
But he was gracious.
And as he came back and forth into the country, the team that I was on would get selected for his protection detail. And that's how I actually got involved meeting with Charlie Wilson, because some of the, I will say, boondoggles that we were protecting this Abu Ghazala on ended up being, for an example, we had Charlie Wilson sent an aircraft up to Tampa, Florida to pick myself up and the protectee, being Abu Ghazala and another agent. We flew to Miami, got on a 185-foot yacht, sailed off into the sunset, and we're out at sea into the Key. We actually went to the Key West, and
Mm.
for whatever they did, they had meetings and a lot of things such as that occurred on protective service details.
So were you one of the guys in the hot tub with Charlie Wilson on the
No, I
yacht?
wasn't in the hot tub. I saw
Okay.
Charlie Wilson in a lot of hot tubs, but I wasn't with Charlie Wilson. But I will tell you that the movie was very much that Tom Hanks portrayed Charlie Wilson was very, very spot on
Oh, cool.
as to what I saw. Always nice to me, very professional, but what they do behind closed doors, I don't know, and I don't talk about it. So, as my career continued with NIS in Memphis, it became apparent at some point in time that I was going to get transferred. So, I volunteered and was selected for an assignment, what they called a float program. And being on as the agent afloat, I went aboard the USS America for a year,
Mm.
did the an assignment in the Mediterranean and into the Indian Ocean.
Mm-hmm.
Went to many, many countries. So part of my job was to do advanced trips where the ship was going to port in. I was in Spain, I was in Majorca, I was in Sigonella, Turkey. I was all over France, um, the Mediterranean cities, Toulon, Marseille,
Mm.
Monaco, Turkey. Went through Egypt. I went through the Suez Canal into the Indian Ocean.
Oh,
Went to a lot of variety of places, but I learned a lot, had a good time. Ever, unfortunately, away from my wife and my two young children at that point in time, and it was stressful because we didn't have the Zoom. We don't didn't have
right.
where you could communicate. My communication was once I got off the ship, I'd go and use a telephone and call the United States and hopefully everything was going well. There wasn't any dire emergencies, and we'd be able to speak to the children. But I went to a lot of places. I learned a lot. I learned how to work independently, especially in a foreign environment. Some of the things we did, you could make it sound you could make it sound like something out of Tom Clancy, but you can embellish a lot of things. But I did have a good time.
Tim, did you know any of the languages for these countries you visited?
I did not. And
Wow.
I had to use a lot of interpreters.
Mm.
I know when I was in Turkey, part of we had if you've ever been to Turkey, they have all of these little designated areas of the police departments, and they all have a different chief. And so you'd have to go and introduce yourself. So I was able to get connected with an Air Force OSI interpreter, and
Ah.
he would travel around to the stations and we would have to always meet and greet and drink Turkish coffee.
Oh
Well,
yeah,
I do not like Turkish
no,
coffee,
yeah.
believe me.
When I had
It,
my only cup of that years ago, I was probably 18 years old. The spoon sort of stood up in the cup by itself. It was amazing, and I was not a
it,
coffee drinker, and so I loaded it with they had honey on the table, and I like honey in my coffee. I think it was half honey, half coffee. And I'll tell you, that cup of coffee was like rocket fuel. It
yes, it
was
was, and
crazy.
then but you had to make it. Had to act like you really enjoyed it and
Yeah,
you were enjoying the company.
as you're running to the bathroom.
Yes.
Which was the country you enjoyed most?
um, I enjoyed southern France a lot. I
Huh.
enjoyed.
You mean like Nice and
Uh,
the Riviera?
Yeah, Monaco. He said we went to
yeah,
No,
Monaco.
well,
no.
yeah, I was in Monaco. I spent about 3 weeks in Monaco. It was really interesting. You saw how lavish the rich and the famous are. You drive over the mountain. It's a 7 mile trip into Cannes,
Mm-hmm.
uh,
Did
France.
you meet Grace Kelly?
No, I did not. I
Oh,
believe that she was already was
Long gone.
deceased at the
oh,
time.
already
She was
gone.
long gone. But I did meet Ringo Starr
Ah,
Cool.
and Barbara Bach, his wife.
Yeah, my favorite Beatle.
Very
okay.
pleasant couple. But what I did find out there, they have the casinos, but they have the casinos for the very wealthy, and then they have the casinos for the commoners.
There you go.
Um,
The
so
nickel slot machine type of thing.
that's exactly right. And I'll tell you a funny story. I've never rolled the dice. So this this Navy pilot asked me, he said, "Hey," he said, "have you ever played craps?" And I said, "No." He said, "All right, well, we're going to go play craps tonight." So I started throwing the dice, and I threw dice probably for an hour. The more I threw, the more money everybody else was making at the table. So at that time, and the more drinks that were coming my way.
Mm.
So this guy, this Navy pilot, was betting for me also, and the chips were in French francs, designated French francs, and they kept piling up and piling up and piling up. And the more drinking that I did, the more intoxicated I became.
As one does, yeah.
Finally made it back to the hotel. I mean, I was sick, drunk, hungover the next morning, and the telephone rings. It's my youngest daughter on the other end, screaming and crying, "Daddy!" And I have no idea what she was crying about. But my wife gets on the phone. And she said, "I just want to let you know what I have to put up with." and, and she hangs the phone up. And I'm thinking, well, welcome, welcome, welcome. But
Welcome to parenthood.
finally, I was able to call back, and but that was just made kind of light of that. But while on the aircraft carrier, I became friends with two guys. One was a guy by the name of Bobby Goodman. Bobby was a lieutenant commander, and Bobby Goodman was a intruder pilot. He and another pilot, it's a two-man aircraft, were shot down in Lebanon
Mm.
back in, I believe it was 1983 is when it was. He was held captive for 31 days. We negotiated his release. And
I remember that.
you remember that?
I remember Goodman. Yes, I do.
Yes, yeah. The Reverend Jesse Jackson got
Jackson.
involved in it and negotiated his release.
Great.
But he and I became very good friends while on the carrier. His part of his job, the shipboard job, was to do a lot of advanced trips that I was also responsible for doing. And then we do these advanced trips to come back and report things that the sailors needed to understand. Especially with my part was to try to pass secret or top secret information to collectors. The Bulgarians were very active in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
There were a lot of other intel agencies that were very active in it. And another person became friends with a guy by the name of Kenneth Braithwaite. And Kenneth was the public information officer on board the ship, and he later became the Secretary of the Navy under the previous Trump administration. Great
Huh.
guy,
Huh.
very personable. But those are two guys that I remember being friends with. So I returned back to the United States, and man, I don't want to ever. I had a good time, but having two children and leaving them there for the responsibility of my wife alone was difficult. So
And at this point, she's a practicing doctor, right?
she's a nurse anesthetist at the time.
Oh, okay.
It was just a stressful
Yeah.
situation, not only for her but for me.
Hmm.
So at that point in time, I reapplied with the Drug Enforcement Administration, and I was selected as an agent. They sent me to Quantico, and I went to from Memphis to Knoxville, Tennessee, where I am now.
Hmm.
A whole different atmosphere, more Appalachia atmosphere, where we were brought up in.
Hmm.
So and that worked out very well. Um, while here in Tennessee, I became DEA had a program called the Domestic Cannabis Eradication Program, and it was a big.
Where are they
It was.
now?
Hey, I don't care who smoked. Don't get that. I could care less.
I know you
You
don't.
know
You've always
the
been cool
intake.
like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but there was a lot of it growing, and in the state of Tennessee. So
Hmm.
I took over this program in 2000, and we had also developed the rappel missions where we were utilizing the National Guard helicopters to transport teams up into the rural mountainous area where it would be really difficult to get into.
Hmm.
They had sent us to air assault school. The U.S. Army had trained us to do the rappelling out of the helicopters. So I had done many helicopter rappels, and on this one occasion, what they tell you is that the dangers of it's all dangerous, but one of the
Yeah.
big dangers of dropping people in on a rappel mission and especially extracting them out is the fear of engine failures or for some reason something potentially could get caught up into the rotor blades of the aircraft.
Hmm.
Now you have this 150-foot rope with 6 guys hanging off the back of it.
How many?
6
6 guys, 1 rope. Okay.
stacked up on top.
Hmm.
So they're pulling us out. We've already completed the mission. We're tied on and we're in the air. I'd done so many of them. I knew something was really wrong. Well, my fear was they were going to have to chop us off the rope. Now, when you say chop us off the rope, they would try to get us to the ground as close as they can,
Hmm.
but and that's literally what they do. They end up chopping you off the rope. What happened was this: we had a new pilot. His speed was so fast that we were just whipping back and forth,
Oh.
trying to figure out what was wrong with the aircraft, which wasn't anything. He was just an inexperienced pilot of not flying, but inexperienced pilot of extracting us out of an area. Get on the ground, didn't think much of it. Supposed to play golf the next day. Hey, I kind of got a twinge in my neck, and ended up being I'd injured my neck severely. Ended up having to have surgery, have
Hmm.
a disc replaced in my neck, and then after that, I quit jumping out of them. I started flying them. So
You know,
that was my transition from being smart but getting smarter. So
yeah.
to keep from to get out of that program. But I learned a lot from it. I led that program in Tennessee for 10 years, actually up to my retirement in 2012.
Hmm.
But since I was a trained fixed wing pilot, I started flying a lot with the Tennessee Highway Patrol and also DEA. We had our own helicopters. The guys were flight instructors, so I basically said, "Hey, would you like to learn how to fly this helicopter?" I said, "Absolutely, I would." So first got my private helicopter rating while involved in the program, and then I ended up getting my commercial rating, which allowed me to I could fly for hire.
Yeah. So the drug dealers could hire you to fly, right?
Right. Well, that was what I had intended to do. I'd actually applied for one of our DEA's air wing positions in
Hmm.
Honolulu. We had a helicopter there and had a helicopter in Hilo,
Hawaii.
but I was not selected for the program or
Mm.
for the position, and I can understand why. I had, even though I was dual rated, they bought people in that was already established in DEA's air wing.
Mm.
But I had a good time flying, and I flew after I retired, and I don't fly helicopters anymore. But I'm still rated. If I decide to get my medical back, I could get up to speed on a helicopter and probably start flying again for hire. I'd actually looked at some positions of flying off the coast of Louisiana, fly out to the oil rigs. But a guy convinced me. He said, all the time you're over water, and what you see is what's going to probably eat you if you have to emergency land in the Gulf Coast. So, and it was difficult because I would have to get from Knoxville to Louisiana to New Orleans, keep a car in New Orleans, drive to the facility, work 15 days on,
Mm-hmm.
15 days off. So, things have a way of working out or not working out. So it all worked out for me.
They'd be mainly passenger transport back and forth to the rigs.
Passengers and a lot of equipment. And
Mm.
then in that job, you start out probably in a four-place helicopter, such as a Bell 407, which I had a lot of time in flying. DEA had those. Then they expect you to transition to more complex helicopters. So it was an opportunity possibly to get into, but again, being away from home, 15 days on, 15 days off, and logistically, it just wasn't something that I love to fly, but it wasn't. It really wasn't worth that and I didn't want to relocate
Yeah.
to Louisiana by any stretch of the imagination.
Did you ever have any close calls in the air?
We had what they called in one of the helicopters a TCAS system, and it alerts you to other helicopters. But we used to fly a lot in the Sequatchie Valley, which is south central Tennessee. It was really plagued with a lot of cannabis growing operations there, but also the Air Force. It was training routes for the Air Force, and we had some close encounters with Air Force jets, C-130s, fighter jets, because especially the fighter jets. Here we are in a little four-place helicopter, and the next thing you know, this jet, literally whizzes by you at some Mach speed, and
Right.
it just shows you how easily that could have been a catastrophic event.
Yeah. Well,
So
recently the plane crash with the helicopter, the military helicopter. I mean, I haven't
yeah,
really heard.
that is a terrible situation. I know there's a lot of people that are Monday morning quarterbacking that, and
Yeah.
that's unfortunate. But flying is dangerous. Flying, especially when you get into a congested area where you're being instructed to do this, and you have to do, unless you realize or an air traffic controller is going to put you into a dangerous situation, you need to listen to what they're instructing you to do.
Yeah. I work with a comic the weekends, and he is an air traffic controller out of LA.
I can imagine he has a stressful job.
He does, man. Wow. This is what he does to decompress, is to do the comedy. He's very funny. But, he's told us some stories, and, sometimes pilots don't listen to them.
Oh, I was watching one the other day where it was an Air Canada flight, and the air traffic controller is telling him, "Say, hey, you to go around, and you can see the other jet.
Mm-hmm.
It's a Southwest jet's on the tarmac, and it is taxied onto the runway, and he keeps saying, Air Canada, go around, go around, go around." Luckily, luckily that the Southwest was able to stop and get on one of the turn
Mm-hmm.
and get off the main runway, or that would have been a very tragic accident.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't understand some issues where a pilot's not doesn't pay any attention. I mean, you have a window, you're looking out, there's visual flight references to what you can see everything
Mm-hmm.
that's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And all you have to do is announce that, hey, there's an aircraft on the ground. I need to initiate a go around, and they'll grant it to you.
Did you ever have anybody shoot at you?
As a matter of fact, we did. We probably had it happen more than once, more often than we could tell, because we flew. You have a headset on. We flew with the doors off, and we're really flying at really low altitudes. But we had one that a guy came out on the porch, and as the helicopter pitched, I had just gotten out of the helicopter. Another person got in my place, and it was about a 10-minute flight, if that, to where they were working this grill operation. But as the helicopter turned, the guy came out, shot up in the air with a rifle, took off. They ended up catching him. Didn't do any initial damage to the engine or the rotorcraft or to the rotor blades, but when they got the helicopter on the ground, you could see where the shotgun pellets had damaged the skin of the helicopter. Didn't penetrate it, but that I know for a fact we probably got shot at quite often. We just didn't know it. And then when you do a pre-flight, we didn't see any bullet holes in the aircrafts. But what you end up doing is that we would fly at low speeds, low altitudes. Helicopters have what they call an emergency landing and auto rotation, but you have to have altitude and speed to be able to
Use it.
initiate and get into an auto rotation. Well, we had neither one. I know I was flying one day and we were they have a dynamic situation called settling with power, and we were bringing a team in to into a wooded area and got over the trees, and I realized that I'm looking at the instrumentation, pulling power in, but the helicopter is settling down, and just luckily I was able to pitch to the right, drop down, pick up some airspeed, and averted a settling with power incident. But a lot of crashes occur with settling with power. Also, you have what they call dynamic rollovers, and those are on the ground. And what happens is, if the helicopter leans over to a certain degree, and you're full power, you can't bring it back.
Oh,
It
yeah, right.
it just rolls over. So you have to watch out. And we had an incident where we had flown in, landed at an airport, and helicopters have skid shoes. You want to stay off pavement as much as you can because they're just hollow. The skids are just hollow tubes. So we'd land in a grassy area. Well, we'd had a lot of rain, and the helicopter weighs about 3,500 pounds, and we did have a rotor brake on the helicopter, so you have to let it sit there. You have to run it down for 2 minutes, and then once you shut the power off, if you don't have a rotor brake, then the main rotor blades they continue to turn, and you can imagine that you have a wallowing effect of the helicopter into the mud or the soft
Driving it in
ground.
there. Yeah.
So we come out, start it up, start to lift up, and we had this suction on one of the skids. And as trying to lift up, it rolls over to the right. But luckily, we were able to get it settled back down and averted the dynamic rollover. And generally, those happen. I've seen pictures of them happening. I realized it was getting ready to happen to us, but we were just fortunate enough to catch it and put both skids back down. Actually, we had one skid off the ground, and the other one was stuck, so to say, in the mud. One of the things when I was on the aircraft carrier, I became friends with the air boss, and I did a lot of flying, a lot of takeoffs and landings. I wasn't the pilot in command; I was just a passenger. But they called down to the NIS office, and the air boss say, "Hey, we've got an open seat in one of the jets, the helicopters. You want to go fly?" And I said, "Sure." So I did a lot of the takeoff and landings off the carrier. And when you're facing forward and you go from 0 to about 80 miles an hour almost instantaneously because you're being catapulted off the aircraft carrier along with your engines at full go. And then you have to catch the line coming back to stop you, and it's a pretty immediate stop. But I did a lot of those while I was deployed on the USS America.
Bob and I have taken, because of you, really, many helicopter trips when we've been on vacation. One time we were out going over the Grand Canyon and a big storm came in and we flew back in. We saw the whole thing. We got our money back. But another time on my 60th birthday, we were in San Francisco, and this helicopter pilot could sense I was kind of a daredevil. So he was flying us around, the bay and whatever, and we were near the Golden Gate Bridge, and he flew under it, which you're not allowed to fly under it. He said, "I'm going to get in trouble." And I loved it, of course. If I'm a bad girl, let's break the rules. Okay, I'm on board. And I knew I wasn't going to get arrested for that. I don't know what happened to him, but that was really a fun thing. And then one New Year's here in San Diego, I booked a New Year's ride, and my brother was with us. And I don't know what kind. Bob, do you know the kind of helicopter we got on?
No, but it was really small. I think it was made by
I,
Mattel or something
My
like that.
brother got out there and he looked at this helicopter.
you
He
know,
goes, "What did Mattel make this?"
I
So,
remember seeing a picture that you had posted,
hmm
and I believe you guys were flying a Robinson 44. Had a
okay,
tall mast to it,
yeah,
kind of funky looking helicopter.
yeah, it looked
Yeah,
like a toy.
Uh,
really,
Looked like
really
a toy.
yeah,
small.
if my memory right, I think you guys were in a Robinson 44, which is actually, even though it's goofy looking, it's a four-place helicopter, and it's a very good helicopter. When I went back to get my commercial helicopter rating, that's what I did a lot of flying in and
Mm,
got my check ride in that. I don't like the way that the cyclic is set up. It's a dual cyclic where you can hand it off to the guy on the left side or right
mm,
side. It's just some really odd things that I just wasn't used to.
yeah,
But it's a really good helicopter, really. Now Robinson 22 is a whole different matter. They're dangerous.
yeah,
Well, they're all dangerous, but especially the Robinson 22.
they are. That's something I have to ask you. First of all, starting off as a cop, everybody knows that's a dangerous job. I mean, nobody says, "Oh, when they police get shot." Well, yeah, police get shot, of course. That happens all the time. I mean, what do you do now? I mean, now you're home and you're retired and you have had some teaching gigs. But, what do you do for that adrenaline that you used to get in those jobs?
Well, I continued flying for a while, and then what I ended up actually doing, I was financially ready to retire, but I wasn't ready uh,
Mentally.
mentally. So I was able to go to work for the Department of Homeland Security, and there's a huge federal law enforcement training facility in Brunswick, Georgia, which is about 20 miles from the Florida state line in Jackson,
Mm-hmm.
East Coast.
Mm-hmm.
I went there and I was on the firearms instruction staff for 6 years. Now, to put things in perspective, just to show you how big the facility is, it used to be a naval air station. In fact, I think back years and years ago, it was actually a blimp station because
Mm-hmm.
it's located right on the coast. But it's been converted. They've taken the runways, they've made high speed driving courses. But we had 150 firearms instructors just in the division I worked in.
Wow.
We ran 12 ranges at any given time. I trained a lot of the Secret Service agents, ATF agents, NCIS,
Mm-hmm.
State Department,
Mm-hmm.
and we'd have them for 13 weeks and run them through their handgun training qualifications, shotguns, rifles, and I truly really enjoyed the 6 years I worked there. But it was what they called a term job, and the length of the term ran out, so at that time, my wife and I were living at St. Simon's Island.
Pretty nice.
Yep, she certainly enjoyed the 6 years at the beach. And but we didn't sell our house here in Knoxville. So oddly enough, each year that I was there, we had to evacuate because of the hurricanes.
Sure.
We were lucky; we had somewhere to come to because we maintained our home here in Knoxville. And again, after the gig ended, we came back here. But now I work for General Dynamics, part-time job. I'm the lead instructor in Knoxville for the FFDO program, and that's the Federal Flight Deck Officer program, where there's several thousand commercial airline pilots that are allowed to carry firearms in the
Mm.
cockpit.
Mm.
And they have to have retraining, and that's what I do here in Knoxville. But it's a very part-time job. But my knives,
Yeah. You make knives.
I took a 6 year hiatus from making knives when I took the job at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center,
Mm-hmm.
and started back. Realized things were going to be slow, but yeah, and I really do. I do have a passion for making knives, and I enjoy it. I've had a lot of good people that taught me. A lot of people that I call on if I have a question. Bob being one of them. so gracious to take his time out to give me his thoughts and his ideas on how he designs these knives, how he makes them. Alan Eliashewitz is a good friend of mine. He's
Mm-hmm.
been very dear to help me. In fact, he lived in Lenore City here in
He
Tennessee for
did.
several years.
We were there.
You were there, and I was
Yeah.
able to work in his shop with him. Learned a lot from his creative abilities, and
Yeah. Very knowledgeable.
then there was Mel Purdue. He was a good friend of mine. Helped me. He since has passed. He's passed on. I've made a lot of good friends in the knife making industry, and I've learned a lot. It's not so much, yeah, it's making knives, but it's also doing what's right. You know, Bob has a saying.
Integrity is being good when no one is watching.
That's absolutely true. And I was taught that a long time ago from Frank Sinofonte.
Mm-hmm.
Not in so many words as you so eloquently put it, but I became friends with many makers, foreign makers, makers here in the United States, a lot of them that are no longer with us anymore. But I do have a passion, and I still do that.
And if someone wants to see your knives, what is the way to reach you?
Well, best way to reach me would be on my just send me a email. It's twilson1811@gmail.com.
Okay. And don't you have a social media page?
It's T Wilson Knives.
Okay.
For years and years, I've been urged to, well, make a website, and my daughters have urged me to do it, but I've just been kind of reluctant to do it. I just don't make that many at a time.
Yeah.
In fact, one of the biggest projects I had was Bob helped me out with that was the Tony Shine Award knives. You remember that, Bob?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I do.
Yep. You came to me in New York and asked me if I'd be interested in making 10 knives for you. Had made the initial batch of knives, and it was pretty interesting because this family, Anthony Shine, he was a lieutenant and was shot down in Vietnam. He was I believe he was a Phantom pilot in the Air Force. His body was never recovered. His family, his one of his daughters, when she became an adult, she traveled to Vietnam, found his crash site, recovered his flight helmet.
Mm-hmm.
He was later his remains were recovered. I believe he was buried in Arlington Cemetery, and his family did this Anthony Shine Award. But again, Bob brought me into that program where I was able to make 10 knives for the family, and the knives are presented to the outstanding Air Force pilot each year. The award's given by the Secretary of the Air Force, but the family also gives this knife to the pilot, or gives a knife to the pilot. And Bob said, "Hey, you've got to mill out the side of the knife handle." And he said, "I'm going to send you some plates." And these plates were taken from the fuselage of
Right.
the type of aircraft that Lieutenant Colonel Anthony Shine was flying at the time when he was shot down. And it's so neat because what they can do is you insert the piece of metal into the handle, and then they are able to take it and have it engraved for the recipient that was
Mm-hmm.
awarded the knife. And I really thought that was so cool. And to this day, I thank you very much, Bob, for involving me in that program.
You're welcome, and I'm going to give you an update. Last week, I got an email from Tony Shine, who's the son.
Yes, right.
Wanted to know if I wanted to get involved in making some more knives for them because they're running out. And this week, Colleen, the daughter, is in Italy. I think she went to Aviano, Italy, the Air Force base there, to present this year's knife to the Air Force Pilot of the Year. So she's there now, as a matter of fact.
Cool.
Well, it was very honoring for you to have thought of enough of me to get me involved in that.
You did a great job.
Yeah, you know, Tim, you're much different than any of the other guests we've had, and I've really enjoyed your stories. I've always enjoyed your stories.
And he's got a lot more of them, too.
He does. He
Well, I hope
does.
I didn't jump around too much where you couldn't figure out what I was talking about, but I really thank you very much for inviting me on this podcast.
Yeah, well, we're glad you were here.
And you two both are very good, dear friends of mine, and that makes it even better.
Okay.
Yes,
Well,
it does.
you stay safe out there.
I will, and you do the same.
Yeah, his feet are on the ground now.
Yeah, your feet are on the ground.
Yep, they are. They are.
But anyway, everybody, thanks for listening. Thanks for putting up with us again. And we've had another episode completely different than any other episode we'd ever had, which I love. I love to mix it up. Arrivederci, right?
Arrivederci, everybody.
All right, bye for now. Thanks for listening. If you like what you're hearing, please share this with a friend and subscribe where you listen to podcasts. Support our efforts through Patreon at TheKnifeWife, and for all Terzuola goodness, go to terzuola.net. And remember, if you're not laughing, you're not living. Comments and questions can be made on Instagram at TheKnifeWife Podcast or our Facebook group, The Knifewife Podcast. And if you're a couple who work together and would like to be on our podcast, tell us about yourself with an email at eccentricsuz.com or terzuola.net.